Welcome to Untitled Terrorist Radio TV. We are back for part 2 of our show. It is Monday, so it is our weekly series. Another update on terrorism. And it wasn't just international, folks. It's here at home. We again welcome Brother Alexis Bonello to the show.
Thank you, AJ. Always glad to be on Ordo Militaris Radio TV, breaking new grounds in independent Catholic media in the English-speaking world, and especially to bring this weekly update about terrorism, because this is really the purpose of our order, to making known how bad it is and helping intervene in as much as we can to prevent Christians from being persecuted.
Let's see. First show. Going with the young white mother killed by Black Lives Matter. Title is Young White Mother Killed by Black Lives Matter Mob for allegedly saying all lives matter. National media fully ignores. A 24-year-old mother was killed by a Black Lives Matter mob in Indianapolis last week, allegedly for saying all lives matter. Unlike Charlottesville or any violence from the right, this killing was reported so quietly that barely anyone even noticed. Jessica Dottie Whittaker was shot and killed following an altercation with Black Lives Matter thugs who were upset that she and her fiancé had said all lives matter last Sunday. According to the victim's family, the shooting started with an argument over Black Lives Matter and language, and eventually the two sides separated and walked away from each other until witnesses claimed the killer opened fire from a nearby bridge and ran away. It was squashed and then up the hill and left, we thought. But they were sitting on St. Clair waiting for us to come under the bridge, and that's when she got shot, the victim's fiancé, Jose Ramirez, told the station. Her grandfather posted on Facebook that multiple black assailants shot her in the head. Why isn't anybody outraged about this? He asked in the post. Is it that BLM was involved, or that it was a young white adult that were the victims? Whittaker leaves behind a 3-year-old son. She shouldn't have lost her life. She got a 3-year-old son she loved dearly, said Ramirez. Her father, Robert Dottie, told the Gateway Pundit that BLM supporters had walked by her and her fiancé said, Black Lives Matter, to which Jessica responded that all lives matter. The BLM activists had allegedly pulled out weapons during the argument, which prompted Ramirez to do the same. This led to them backing off, but not for long. The argument started, guns came out, and they worked things out. Unfortunately, they didn't drop it and waited for them to walk back through. She was shot in the head, Dottie told the Gateway Pundit. Dottie confirmed that neither CNN nor Fox News has reached out for information about the case, despite the murderer being on the loose. When asked how the family is holding up, Dottie said, one day at a time is all we can do. Her sister Jennifer told the Gateway Pundit that they were walking the canal with friends after an awesome 4th of July celebration. It's heart-wrenching to watch my mother explain to my 3-year-old nephew that Mommy is an angel in heaven, Jennifer told the Gateway Pundit, adding, and him ask when we can go get her and bring her back. Jennifer told the Gateway Pundit that her sister was a certified nursing assistant, doing home health care and getting ready to go back to school to become a registered nurse. Her son was her world, and she had the kindest heart and was in no way racist toward anyone, Jennifer told Gateway Pundit. Ramirez says that the hardest part has been explaining to her son, Grayson, that his mother will not be coming back. It's hard to tell him his mom is in heaven. If you want to talk to her, you have to look up and say, I love you, Mom, said Ramirez. We're going through a lot. The 3-year-old boy doesn't even understand, really. said Ramirez. I just want justice for Jessica and her son and her family. The police are still looking for suspects and have released a video from the area of the murder. Anyone with information about the shooting is asked to call the IMPD Homicide Office 317-327-3475 or Crime Stoppers of Central Indiana at 317-262-8477 or TIPS.
This is a terrible, terrible case. First, let's point out that just because you get killed by Black Lives Matter doesn't mean you go to heaven, okay? So as Catholics, we can't, share that view. However, the woman chose the way of peace. She started an argument and left in peace without any intention of doing evil to anyone. What was done to her is a perfect example of the way of things, what you're going to see in the Islamic world or with Marxists. You cannot argue with them rationally because their ideology is based on lies. And when you show them that, they lash out with violence. And both groups, Marxists and Muslims, are all about exterminating their ideologic enemies. If you're the kind of person that can argue with them, they want you dead. And here's a perfect example. This woman was killed in an act of absolute Marxist, racist rage. And the man who did it hopefully will get the death penalty. I don't know if Indiana, or the men who did it will get the death penalty. I don't know if they have that in Indiana. It also is an example of prudence. If you run into people like this, don't talk to them. Withdraw in a protected way, especially if you have a gun on you. Withdraw, show yourself you have a gun, and walk away, because you're only going to incite these madmen to be more violent. Okay, you can't rationalize people who are utter Marxists and utter racists, and it's really unfortunate what happened to this young woman, and it's vicious that they shot her. She doesn't sound like she had a gun. Only her boyfriend had a gun. So it was definitely a race war in the sense that they wanted to exterminate a mother who could have future children and make the neighborhood more white. So it's absolutely vicious. It comes under the category of genocide too, because they're out to kill out the whites in the neighborhood. Maybe they didn't shoot her boyfriend because he's Hispanic and they consider him not white.
Let's see. Let's go to Beantown. The Virgin Mary statue set on fire outside of Boston's church. Let's see here. By Rick Sobey at BostonHerald.com. A statue of the Virgin Mary was set ablaze outside of Boston Church Saturday night, said police, who are investigating the arson incident. Officers at 10 p.m. responded to a call of fire in the air at 284 Bowden Street in Dorchester. On the arrival at St. Peter's Parish, the officers saw that the statue of the Blessed Virgin Mary had been set on fire. Someone had lit plastic flowers on fire, which were in the hand of the Virgin Mary's statue. According to the member of the Boston Fire Department Fire Investigation Unit, that caused the statue's face and upper body to get burned, according to the officials. Father John Curry, pastor at St. Peter's Parish, said a prayer next to the Virgin Mary statue Sunday afternoon. This is also someone who's disturbed, someone who has a troubled soul, Curry said of the unknown suspect. I know Our Lady in heaven is looking down at the soul, or whoever it may have been, and saying, I love you, he said. If you need help, come get help. We're here for you. A spokesman for the Archdiocese of Boston said in a statement, whoever is responsible for the desecration of the Holy Mother statue is clearly a troubled soul. Mary represents all that is good and pure in our world. We have confidence in local law enforcement to investigate this matter. The spokesman said, "We pray for the person or persons responsible." Mayor Martin Walsh said in a statement, "Any act of hatred or destruction towards religious figures is deeply saddening and unacceptable, regardless of face. It's our responsibility to be respectful towards other religious beliefs. I'm confident the Boston police will investigate the case to its full extent, as they do with every other case of vandalism in our city," the mayor said. The Boston Police Department is investigating. The police said that anyone with information should contact District C11 detectives at 617-343-4335. The Boston Police said in a statement, "The Boston Police Department will strongly guard and protect the identities of all those who wish to assist this investigation in an anonymous manner."
This one really cuts it home because I went to minor seminary in Boston. I know this church. I've sung in the choir. I know exactly. It's right next to it's in an enclave of you might say a white neighborhood. It's right on the edge of a black neighborhood that's always had a lot of crime and violence. So they just went down to the street to the first church, and the attack is done in such a way as to turn the face of Our Lady black. So I think that's pretty clear what it was done. You can't really light plastic flowers on fire unless you pour gasoline or something on them.
Mm-hmm.
And now they're going to have to sandblast that statue very carefully to keep its beauty. It's a beautiful statue of Our Lady praying like this. And absolute vicious anti-Catholic bigoted hate, maybe involving racism too. And I don't think anyone who's a Christian would have done that. Everyone knows what the image of Our Lady looks like. So you need, as we've said many times, churches who have statues now should have guards out there just until this time of rioting calms down, because they're not going to attack a fortified site. That's churches on a main street. Anyone could drive down it and stop. And probably at nighttime, no one's around because it's kind of in a semi-commercial area now. But you need to have volunteers. Otherwise, you're going to have these monuments that are worth $50,000, $100,000 permanently damaged, and how will you have the money to fix them? Yeah. So in a way, it's not only an act of vandalism or act of racial hate or act of religious bigotry. It's an act of financial warfare, because the cost to fix these statues is tremendous. And it puts a lot of burden on small Catholic parishes that are already financially not well off.
What? Hold on, folks. You want to make an unscheduled stop here. Brand new one. Alaskan Airlines flight makes emergency landing after passenger screams, "He will kill everybody if they won't accept Jesus was black." Just recently published. Only in 2020. A deranged white man traveling from Alaska to Chicago threatened to kill passengers if they would not accept Jesus was a black man. Alaskan Airlines plane made an emergency landing in Seattle. Yeah.
This is really an act of heretical hate, okay? Unless you renounce Jesus Christ to the historic one who was, of Jewish descent and not black, he's going to kill you all. Yeah. People think that these people are playing games. I know you could laugh at it because it's so serious, but it's not as serious. These people are out for genocide, okay? They're out for the destruction of Christianity, and they're out for killing all whites. So this is a clear, the responsibility for this is on the mass media and the Democratic Party. They have instrumentalized these people to be the new brown shirts, black shirts of the fascist Nazi Democratic Party. And they're going to have, and the purpose is to terrify you so much you won't go and vote. So it's a vicious thing, and if we had justice in this country, not only the leaders of these groups would all be under arrest, but the Democratic Party would be arrested too, because they're the ones behind it. They're the ones pushing it. The media too should all be arrested for promoting this thing and urging these people on, because they're going to get worse. From praising them for the little acts they do, they're going to go worse. Next, it will be a plane falling out of the sky because the guy did blow it all up and kill everyone. So that, as I said back in 2016, the Democratic Party is going to become a party of terrorism. People laughed at me when I said it on Twitter because they see that as the only objective now. Only way it means they are going to obtain victory in the West, because the West realizes they're a bunch of trash, these lefties. So now they're going to go for destroying the West, because if they can't have it, they'll destroy it. That's their mentality. They're right up there with Adolf Hitler, Stalin, and Mao Zedong.
Yeah. Okay, I went to the Ocala church burning. I went to the Facebook update to the Marion County Sheriff's Office. It reads, Marion County Sheriff's Office deputies responded to Queen of Peace Catholic Church, located at 6455 Southwest State Road 200. After receiving reports of someone setting fire to the sanctuary, all several parishioners were inside preparing for a morning mass. Arriving deputies learned that the defendant, Stephen Anthony Shields, had intentionally crashed the vehicle through the front doors of the church, exited the vehicle and poured gasoline out into the foyer area and then lit it on fire. He then left in the vehicle. Deputy Jose Gonzalez spotted the vehicle leaving the area, gave chase. The defendant fled until Deputy Gonzalez was able to conduct a precision immobilization technique and disable the fleeing vehicle in the 5900 block of South Highway 441, where the defendant was taken into custody. The prisoner was able to escape without injury, and Marion County Fire Rescue personnel were able to quickly extinguish the fire. Shields has been charged with one count of attempted second-degree murder, evidencing prejudice, a first-degree felony, one count of arson to the structure where persons are normally present, in which the defendant had reasonable grounds to believe to be occupied by a human being, evidencing prejudice, a life felony, one count of burglary of an occupied structure with intent to commit a forcible felony with assault while armed, using a motor vehicle as an instrument, and causing damage to the structure in excess of $1,000, while evidencing prejudice, a life felony, one count of felony fleeing or attempting to elude. He is being held in Marion County Jail on no bond. Sheriff Billy.
Well,
what?
No, go right ahead. I thought you had finished.
Sheriff Billy Wood said, "Our freedom of worship granted in the Constitution is a freedom that we all hold dear. My deputies and I are sworn to protect that right and will always ensure our citizens can worship in peace. I'm proud of my deputies for capturing this man so quickly, and we appreciate the assistance from all the state and federal agencies that worked alongside us during this investigation."
I have to commend the sheriff and his men for their quick response in catching this perp. I also point out that Steve Anthony Shields is a white man. He cuts his hair as if he's a French musketeer. Shields is an English name. So if this guy attacked the Catholic churches, obviously he's a bigot, but he might also be a Marxist. It's not quite clear why he would attack the Catholic Church. But the Catholics, as Catholics, we know in the United States, we're the most hated group. Once the mass media has anointed the Black Lives or Antifa movements as legitimately expressing violent hatred for whites or Christians, these people are going to come out of the woodwork and attack. And so it's very important, since there's bigots in almost every community, that Catholic churches have security or something. This case, there's really not much one could have done, but if there was a security officer there, he could have shot into the car and attempted to stop him from hitting the church. But you have to be quick on your reflexes. So fortunately, no one was gravely hurt, but the damages are probably over $100,000. And that poor parish, how are they going to afford it? So I don't know if they've started a fundraiser, but try to help them out if they can. So, but this is just the weaponization of hate against Catholics. Black Lives Matter, Antifa, the mass media didn't take long to push it towards Catholics and Christians. That's their real target, because those are the people who alone can be enemies of Marxists, and they know who their enemies are, even if we aren't as willing to admit that they are our enemies.
Yeah. And the last one for the U.S. Massive fire at historic San Gabriel mission destroys roof and much of the interior. It was a wake without a body as hundreds of parishioners from the San Gabriel mission Roman Catholic community gathered Saturday in the parking lot to cry, grieve, and pray after a fire tore through the historic landmark. Flames destroyed the roof and most of the just refurbished church pews and portions of the interior, though some of the statues and other historic items survived. The blaze came amid a backlash against California missions and other colonial monuments that for many serve as painful reminders of the nation's racist history. What?
What a bunch of baloney is that? Yes, racist history, yeah, sure.
For that reason, investigators, including the representative from the Federal Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, when they had that on there, were looking into whether it was intentionally set, officials said. My heart is full of sadness, said 70-year-old San Gabriel resident Anita Chavez, who calls herself a lifetime parishioner. The church has been at the center of my family, my world, my faith. The authorities received a call at 4:24 a.m. reporting that the mission's fire alarm had been triggered, said Captain Antonio Negrete, public information officer for the San Gabriel Fire Department. When an engine arrived to investigate, fighters saw flames and smoke coming from the corner of the mission. More units arrived on scene and firefighters mounted an aggressive attack fighting the flames from inside the church building. But after 15 minutes, portions of the structure started to fall on them. They made a decision to exit and move to a defensive attack position, battling the fires from outside, Negrete said. The fire was eventually raised to 4 alarms, drawing 50 firefighters from San Gabriel Fire Department and other agencies. They were able to knock down the fire at 6:48 a.m. No injuries were reported, but the damage to the building was extensive. The roof of the mission is completely gone. The interior up to the altar is completely destroyed. Negrete said the bell tower and museum remained intact, he said.
Yeah, yeah, go ahead. I tend to think this is a deliberate.
Yeah. Still, most valuable artifacts escaped damage, so the relics of Saint of Blessed Father Juniper Serra. And the altar is still intact, including the historical wooden statues that were attached to the altar.
Mm-hmm. Thanks be to God. The fire breaking out at like 4:30 in the morning, you know, that's not really a time of the day any electrical fires would break out. They said it started in the fire loft, but it sounds just too convenient, because if that mission had burnt to the ground totally, you would have lost a tremendous amount of art, of native art that's in that museum of the first Christians of California. And it's obviously, so it seems to me, an attempt to destroy the complete Catholic history and native history of the California people. So I wouldn't be surprised they find out that someone threw an incendiary on that building, or broke into it and started the fire all off. They're out not just to do attacks here and there, they're out to wipe out Christian civilization bit by bit. They are barbarians, and this is why every Catholic parish needs a protective security group. You need to have men and volunteers that take security seriously and around the clock watch your parish, especially if you're on a main street. This is one of the more important historical monuments of California, so it was a high-profile target. It should have had, with all this going on, it should have had guard around it. So if you love your parish, guard your parish. It's not really that tough to wake up early or take 3-hour shifts and spend the night with someone around there with a cell phone, because they're not going to attack a place that has someone there, because that will see them. Okay, so it's terrible shame, but it should have been defended. That, there's only 16 or so missions in California. It's not hard for 60 million people to defend them. So the Catholics of California really need to examine their conscience. This place should have been defended. There should have been guards there.
All right. Now we go to Iran. All right. Let's see here. Comes from the WND.com website. Written by the WND staff. Title: Iran violating own constitution by persecuting Christians. Iran's Islamic regime has been criticized by the United States for persecution of religious minorities, including Christians. We'll get into that some more later. By this time, the criticism is being heard at the United Nations Human Rights Council, an argument by the European Center for Law and Justice based on the United Nations Charter and Iran's own constitution. A representative of the ECLJ, affiliate of the American Center for Law and Justice, noted in the session of the council that Iran's constitution states, "The government of the Islamic Republic of Iran and all Muslims are duty bound to treat non-Muslims in conformity with ethical norms and the principles of Islamic justice and equity, and to respect their human rights." However, the ECLJ rep said the actions of the Iranian government reflect a very different philosophy in its treatment of Christians and other religious minorities. Christians are being oppressed into silence as preaching Christian doctrine or leading others to salvation through Jesus Christ could lead to being arrested and charged as the enemy of the state. Christian converts have been sentenced to years of wrongful imprisonment. This injustice has to stop now, the ECLJ said Monday. "We just delivered a critical oral intervention at the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva, Switzerland, through our European affiliate office, the European Center for Law and Justice, asking for protection for Iranian Christians and pressure on Iran to honor not only its UN charter, but its own constitution," the organization said. The statement noted that 99% of Iran's 83 million people are involved with some form of Islam. Only 0.2% of the population participates in Christianity or another minority religion. Yet a human rights organization said Iran this year was the 9th worst place to live for Christians who are targeted often for no more than living out their faith in their community. The organization cited Christian pastor Yusuf Nadakarani, who has been repeatedly targeted for arrest and abuse by the Iranian government. He was most recently arrested in July 2018. And the ACLJ said, as a member of the United Nations, that Iran has the responsibility to adhere to the principles set forth in the UN Charter. It is imperative that Iran works to actively protect the rights of its citizens and reform its laws so that all citizens are free to practice their religion peacefully without fear of arrest and violence from their government. Our presentation to the UNHRC occurred just days after the Trump administration announced the president's landmark executive order on advancing international religious freedom, which we told you detailed how the United States will make enforcement of religious freedom an integral part of the U.S. foreign policies and U.S. State Department programs, the ACLU said. It should serve as a notice to nations like Iran where such persecution is taking place that it would be in their best interest to implement immediate changes to protect their Christian citizens as well as other religious minorities.
Well, that's a really good. What these legal units have done is really wonderful. That they've brought this to the fore and gave this an international profile. Iran has been for since the revolution broke out in '78. It's been for decades persecuting Christians bitterly, and people are absolutely terrified. And yet, the knowledge of Christianity is quite spread, and the idea of Christianity has become much more popular than in decades past. So there's one church dedicated to Our Lady, I think, in Tehran, that's become even a popular place for Muslim women to visit. So this is a wonderful example of what can be done on the international level and at a legal level, and it really should be done regularly around annually for every country where Christians are being persecuted. But one bright note in a week of terrors.
Let's see. There we go. I said we get back to what the United States is doing. Brother Alex just sent me this early this morning. From the Deacon's Bench with Deacon Greg Kendra. Title: Shocking. Far fewer persecuted Christians being admitted to the U.S. From the Washington Post. The number of Christian refugees admitted to the United States after fleeing persecution in the native countries has plummeted 90% since 2015, according to the report released Friday by two Christian advocacy groups. Numbers cited by the World Relief and Open Doors USA show that fewer Christians from 50 countries where Christians face the most persecution were admitted to the United States in President Trump's first 3 years in office, combined with the 2016 alone. Though the report said people from a variety of religions have been shut out of the United States by a steep decline in resettlement in the past few years, Christians have been hit particularly hard. Among those most disadvantaged have been Christian refugees from the countries where Christians face most severe persecution in the world, the report said. An annual ceiling for all refugees was set by the president at 18,000 this year, compared with the historic average of 81,000, and down from 110,000 that President Barack Obama said should be admitted in his last year of office. In 2018, Canada surpassed the United States as the world-leading harbor for refugees, taking in 28,000 people, while 22,000 came to the United States. So far in 2020, fewer than 950 Christians have been resettled from 50 countries where discrimination against Christians in particular acute. If the pace continues, the report said, this year's travel will be almost 90% below the 18,000 Christian refugees admitted 5 years ago. For people fleeing some countries, the decline has been even more precipitous. In the first 6 months of 2020, 336 Christians from Myanmar were allowed to come, down from more than 11,000 settled in 2015. Only 43 Iraqi Christians were settled in the first half of the year, compared with 1,500 in 2015 and 2000 in 2016. A State Department spokesperson said that the fiscal 2020 5,000 places were set aside for people subject to religious persecution. As of June 30, a total of 3,564 people had been admitted. Even as governors and mayors have pleaded with the administration to allow in more immigrants, the White House repeatedly slashed the number of refugee admissions. At times, the admissions have not even reached the lowered ceilings set by the president. With just 3 months left in the current fiscal year, fewer than 7,600 refugees have been accepted, less than half the announced capped. According to World Relief, in their shocking report, Closed Doors, Persecuted Christians in U.S. refugee resettlement and asylum process. World Relief and Open Doors USA document the tragic persecution of Christians whose only crime is belief in Jesus, said Walter Kim, president of the National Association of Evangelicals. Even more shocking is the revelation that the United States, long a beacon of hope for those fleeing religious persecution, has closed its doors to virtually everyone seeking a protection, including persecuted Christians. We must change this policy and remain a leader for religious freedom. We're living in what St. John Paul II called a new age of martyrdom, where many worldwide face persecution for their faith, said Bishop Mariel E. Dornsonville, Auxiliary Bishop of Washington and Chairman of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops Committee on Migration. As this report documents, there are dramatic decreases in the ability of those fleeing for their lives to access protection. I pray our nation reverse course and once again stand with refugees and asylum seekers, including those escaping religious persecution. Catholic and evangelical leaders have formally asked the administration to consider refugees fleeing persecution at this time.
This is absolutely horrible. Doesn't anyone remember the campaign back in 2016, all about how bad Obama was for letting in Muslims and shutting out Christians? And how many times Trump said it's the Christians who are persecuting have the most right and should be welcomed into America. And yet he reduces the number by 90%. And if you look at that statistic, 900 and some odd Christians were allowed in, but 3,500 altogether. So that means only a quarter of the refugees being allowed in were Christian. He's letting in refugees from other countries who are, if they're not refugees from Christianity, then they're coming from where? What religions? Islam? So he's actually increased the percentage of Muslims coming in while decreasing the total numbers altogether.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a complete betrayal of his campaign promise, if to say it in the least. It's a complete betrayal. It's also a betrayal of America's values. So you're not going to make America great again when you shut the doors in the face of Christians. I mean, even in the time when Nazi Germany was rising, the American president, who was opposed to allowing Jews come in, eventually let them come in. But not that consideration for Christians from the Trump administration, who's always flaunting how Christian they are. There's a big disconnect here.
Yeah. Now we go to the postmail.com. Incremental Islam for Extreme Punishments by Jane Bate and Brian Hermendorfer. Our Second Amendment guarantees that the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. There are no exclusions. The amendment applies to all ages, genders, races, and religions. Now let us see how Sharia rulings on weaponry compare with those of our Constitution. The reliance of the traveler mentions on at least two occasions the prohibition against non-Muslims owning weapons in section K1.2F. It states, it is a condition that someone buying weapons be of a people who are not at war with Muslims, since it is an obligatory
Obligatory.
Yeah. Goal of Islam to establish a global caliphate. There is perpetual tension, whether overt or not, between Muslim and non-Muslim territories. In section, what was it? W52.1, lines 189 and 193, includes the prohibition of sales of weapons to non-Muslims who will use them against us. Darn. Additionally, Mark Drury, in his book The Third Choice, writes that Demis non-Muslim subjects of the Islamic State could not bear weapons, and they were forbidden from raising a hand against a Muslim. Oops.
Mhm. So while we're all talking about right of liberty and freedom to bear arms in the Islamic world, Islamic law says Christians don't have the right to bear arms. So you can see how unequal it is and how much they intend the persecution of Christians. They want them totally disarmed so they can be killed at any moment. And that is a way of terrorizing them, because Islam is a political philosophy of terrorization, and highly manipulative psychologically and even culturally and socially. So I think that's something people don't understand, how in Islamic countries it's expected that Christians not arm themselves or defend themselves. And that's why they get so persecuted.
Um, Next one comes from Jihad Watch. Italy, Muslim migrants naturalized Italian citizens, murders Italian for being white and happy. Excuse me. I looked at him and I was sure he was Italian. I wanted to kill a guy like me. Take away all the promises he had, children, remove him from his friends and relatives. Why did Said Mecca became a naturalized citizen in the first place? What are the chances that after he serves a few years of his sentence and is released, that he will become a loyal, stable, productive member of Italian society? And what is the ultimate basis for his hatred for Italians in the first place? Have investigators looked into that, or are they content with a racial angle, which in itself shed further light on why jihadists and Marxist race agitation groups work so well together? And he goes into Breitbart. Migrant who killed Italian for being white, happy, gets 30 years in prison by Chris Tomlinson. Moroccan-born Saeed Makout has been sentenced to a maximum 30 years behind bars over a year after he murdered the Italian man Stefano Leo in Turin because he was white and happy. The murder took place on February 23rd on the banks of the River Po in Turin, but it wasn't until around a month later that 27-year-old Makout, a naturalized Italian citizen born in Morocco, confessed to the killing. Italian prosecutors Ciro Santorio and Enzo Lucari both pushed for the maximum sentence of 30 years in the case, after remarking that Makout showed little to no remorse following the murder. Maria Grazia Chiri, the mother of Stefano Leo, was also present at the sentencing and commented, "We have always been confident, and the sentence gives us that reason. Justice has run its course," Italian newspapers Corriere della Sera reports. Basilio Foti, the lawyer for Makout, said they expected the sentence to be reduced on appeal, however, noting that McLeod came forward himself and confessed to the crime. The confession, which took place over a month after the murder, saw the Moroccan migrant explain to the police that he killed Leo simply because he was white and looked happy. I hit I hit a white, based on the obvious fact that a young Italian would have caused a sensation, he allegedly told police. I looked at him, I was sure he was Italian. I wanted to kill a guy like me, take away all the promises he had, children, and move him from his friends and relatives.
Active genocide, that's it, is political and racial and religious genocide. I point out that the Moroccans are not blacks, okay? They have a skin slightly darker than myself, and but they're nearly all Muslims. But it's absolutely outrageous. So it shows you that even the Moroccans are not Arabs, they're Moors. Even Moors can be racists. It's absolutely outrageous what this guy did. Italy does not have the death penalty according to its constitution. So, but the problem is even if you were sentenced to 30 years, you could get out with good behavior for maybe after 8 or 12, and you'll get out As long as you just tell everyone you're sorry. Do you have to be sorry? This
Man,
guy is probably going to get in trouble in prison, though.
I don't know if I should say what I'm thinking, but
It's best perhaps not to say it, but
okay. I was thinking of some quotes from The Godfather. Okay, we go to rarefoundation.com. Sharia Denmark. Head of political party Rasmus Paludan heads to prison for crime of racism. Rasmus Paludan, head of the Danish Stram Kurs party, was sentenced to jail as well as fined with this month in Copenhagen for the crime of racism based on his remarks criticizing Islam. Paludan is well known an advocate for Western values and is outspoken opponent of communism and Islamic influence on Western culture. Meanwhile, the spokesperson for Black Lives Matter Denmark, of course, while out Sorensen forced white-skinned protesters to the back so that black people should stand in front during the recent Black Lives Matter protest in Copenhagen. Is this racist? Should she be arrested? Mm. Marxists are entirely uninterested in calling out discrimination against gay people, religious minorities, and women in Muslim majority countries. Similarly, Marxists only use race baiting as a battering ram against the West to further their agenda of destroying European civilization. In the process, people of European descent, for example, Muslims, can scream from the rooftops about murdering gay people, and Marxists will not utter a peep in their defense. A core principle of Islam is to kill gay people. In Denmark, it appears the vocal critics of known Islamic doctrine are racist and must be punished. And it goes on. Oh yeah, it talks about Kevin Crehan, where he left a bacon sandwich outside of the Jamia Mosque in Bristol in 2016. You remember that one we covered?
yeah, I remember that. So this guy probably just said something about Muslims or Arabs, so they trumped him up for a charge on racism. This is how they shut down discourse, okay? And unfortunately, it's not in every country that there is liberty of expression. But some people, let the absolute injustice of the events from which you've been detailing in this report lead them to maybe say things that they could get them caught on. So it's very important to emphasize that Islam is not a race. So if you're opposed to Islam, you can't be a racist because there are Muslims who are white, like the Muslims of Bosnia, and there are Muslims who are black, like the Muslims of Nigeria. There are Muslims who are Chinese, or Chinese extraction, racial, I mean to say, sinology, I forget the exact term for it, of Central Asia. There are Muslims of the Dravidian race of southern India. And I'm sure there's Muslims even in South America who have Latino extraction, just as in the United States we find Muslims both black and white, both of African and European descents or even Arab descent. So that would be like saying anyone who's bigoted against Catholicism is guilty of race. So why can't we Catholics claim that they're racists if they burn a statue of Our Lady? See, it doesn't work both ways. The exaggeration, the misuse, the injustice is all used against honest people, Europeans and Christians, and especially Catholics. And they allow people to be prosecuted on these outrageous charges as a way of breaking you down and making you submit. It's planned, it's intentional, it's a political program. And as has been clear ever since the Iraqi wars, the international socialists, Marxists are strictly allied with the Islamic jihadis. And that's why Obama created and funded ISIS and defended them. And that's why the left-wing governments of Europe welcomed ISIS fighters back in and give them free housing and welfare and everything, because they were doing the will of the left-wing governments. They wiped out Christians and non-Marxist Muslims in Syria. Now they brought them to Europe to do it there too. So It's outrageous, but Denmark's government is completely whacked out. There's been a lot of protests there too. Um, um, so much so that in that bombing there in Sri Lanka, 3 children of a family of one of the most wealthy men in Denmark were killed. But he didn't utter a peep about it because he knew he could be arrested in his own country for racism, even though his children were blown to such small bits that they couldn't even be identified.
Yeah. And we are going to cover another one just like that, but in Austria from Gatestone Institute by Judith Bergman. Uh, let's see here. European Commission Against Racism and Intolerance recently published its sixth monitoring report on Austria. The ECRI, which described itself as independent, is the human rights monitoring body of the Council of Europe, not to be confused with the European Union. The Council of Europe is composed of 47 member states, including all the 27 European Union member states. The ECRI is an unelected body with members designated by their governments, one for each member state, who are supposed to have in-depth knowledge in the field of combating intolerance and recognize expertise in dealing with racism, xenophobia, anti yeah, anti oh boy, I can't speak today. Anti-Semitism and intolerance. It was founded in 1994 by the heads of state of the Council of Europe, with a mandate, among other things, to review member states' legislation, policies, and other measures to combat racism, xenophobia, anti-Semitism, and intolerance, and their effectiveness. Thanks to in large part of the efforts of the ECRI and the Council of Europe, Europe now has a huge web of hate speech laws and policies. Gatestone has previously reported on the ECRI's monitoring of Germany and Switzerland. In its sixth monitoring report of Austria's ECRI wrote that progress has been made and good practices have been developed in a number of fields. Austria has now taken several initiatives to thwart hate speech by developing a counter narrative. The authorities have worked with civil society to improve the detection and recording of online hate and to provide support to victims of such incidents. In 2018, the authorities concluded with agreement with social network providers to remove hate speech within 24 hours. However, according to the ECRI, Austria must do more. The ECRI notes with concern that Austrian public discourses have become increasingly xenophobic in recent years, and political speech has taken on highly divisive and oh man, I can't speak. I'm trying not to laugh.